The battle concluded with a devastating, almost silent, victory. The divine demon, Jing Qian, raises his sword once more, a final, decisive strike. They surged forward, believing the divine demon was finally spent, ready to deliver the finishing blow. The final confrontation begins as Jing Qian stands utterly spent yet defiant. Now, only one challenge is left. The surviving masters, though broken, rally for one final, desperate offensive against the demon. The divine demon's eyes glowed with raw, menacing power as he faced his next victim. The force of the demon god's attack slams into the monk with devastating impact. Even as the abbot summoned his power, Jing Qian remained the ultimate target. The abbot unleashed his ultimate attack, the heavenly Buddha palm strike, a blinding wave of green energy. The divine demon unleashed a final, devastating strike, glowing with dark, potent energy. The divine demon, Jing Qian, strikes with overwhelming force, shattering their defenses. The divine demon's overwhelming red energy met the abbot's desperate counterattack head-on. With the martial master's desperate, Jing Qian strikes, a terrifying final surge of power against the allied sects. The clash of techniques erupted, a violent storm of clashing energies and sword strikes. The battle culminates as two devastating techniques, the Plum Blossom Flash Strike and the Thunder Rolling Strike, are unleashed simultaneously. His final act was a desperate, ultimate strike against the divine demon. Despite the fatal wound, Jing Qian roared, his demonic energy flaring violently. With his final, desperate surge, Jing Qian unleashes a torrent of unyielding energy. As the final strike lands, the Shaolin abbot offers a grim blessing for the divine demon's soul. Despite the monk's final, desperate green energy strike, Jing Qian's dark intent cleaves downward. A final, desperate attempt to strike, engulfed in chilling red energy. A visceral, crimson sound effect erupts, signaling the brutal conclusion of the battle. The divine demon endures the seemingly fatal blow, shaking the very heavens with his presence. With all opposition crushed, Jing Qian coldly declares the final act is yet to come. The remaining martial masters could only watch in stunned terror as Jing Qian stood victorious. The long, shadowed path of vengeance finally culminated in this devastating impact. The divine demon is met by a devastating, lightning-infused counterattack as desperation erupts. The divine demon, Jing Qian, effortlessly drives his blade through the elder's chest. The divine demon erupts, his terrifying power consuming the space as he unleashes his fury. With a final, desperate surge, Jing Qian unleashes his power, the air itself screaming around his blade. Their final, desperate clash shakes the very air, testing the limits against the one deemed the greatest under heaven. The clash of ultimate power erupted, sending blinding sparks across the void. The divine demon, Jing Qian, prepares his final, devastating strike against his enemies. The confrontation culminates in a deadly flurry, manifesting as the breathtaking, yet lethal, Plum Blossom Ring. The divine demon released a devastating surge of dark power, overwhelming the space around him. The final, agonizing gasp of the Namgung patriarch was silenced, yet the demon refused to yield. The memory of the family, a moment of peace and shared affection under the warm sunlight, was the meaning he sought. The divine demon's eyes blazed with malevolent red, the sword held ready after fulfilling his bloody revenge. The divine demon unleashed his ultimate technique, the Black Dragon Execution, bathing the scene in crimson power. His scream of agonizing defeat ripped through the air as the blood-soaked carnage climaxed. The divine demon unleashes a blinding flash of blue power, momentarily obscuring everything. The divine demon unleashes his ultimate technique, the infinite Emperor Sword Art. But even after piercing his heart, the divine demon remains standing, defying all logic. But in those moments, they're the most precious. His final burst of power ripped through the air, defying the mortal limits they thought he possessed. The divine demon, Jing Qian, had seemingly accomplished the impossible, leaving the surrounding masters in utter disbelief. The divine demon, Jing Qian, raises his sword amidst a terrifying crimson aura. Despite the seemingly fatal blow, the divine demon erupted with shocking, overwhelming malice. Despite the fatal wound, the divine demon merely roared, his demonic aura flaring with impossible fury. The divine demon's strike, shrouded in demonic aura, slams into the master of the Namgung clan. The shock of defeat fuels a final, desperate curse aimed at the divine demon. The divine demon unleashes a final, explosive strike, the sound of impact echoing through the air. The divine demon unleashes a blinding surge of pure, devastating energy. The divine demon, Jing Qian, unleashes his devastating technique against the remaining martial masters. The devastating blow landed, a brilliant, icy shockwave of power erupting around the divine demon. The divine demon unleashed a final, desperate command, driving his power through the blade. The divine demon, Jing Qian, erupts in laughter amidst the chaos of his sudden return. After the long, bloody path, clarity finally dawned amidst the gentle glow of his family. Despite the final blow, Jing Qian held on, demanding a brutal end to the conflict. The enraged divine demon, eyes burning red, delivers a final, decisive blow. Despite the piercing blow, the divine demon roared, refusing to yield even to the final strike. Despite the fatal blow, the divine demon refused to yield, his monstrous will echoing a final, strained defiance. The divine demon suffered the ultimate blow, a desperate, futile gasp against insurmountable power. A final, desperate grab as life and blood drains away in a violent eruption. The overwhelming force of his technique manifested in a terrifying torrent of crimson and shadow. The divine demon, Jing Qian, stands amidst the aftermath of ultimate vengeance. Even as his enemies fell, the divine demon's presence lingered, a dark, explosive force against the dying light. The divine demon, Jing Qian, stands resurrected before them, his victory complete. The dust settled on a field drenched in blood, the alliance of the great sects utterly vanquished. The heavy, blood-smeared sword remained clutched tightly, its wielder's vengeance finally achieved. The divine demon, Jing Qian, stands wounded, yet unyielding, his purpose achieved. The divine demon, Jing Qian, now faces the raw, desperate survival of the past. The divine demon reaches out, an imposing gesture cutting through the silence. The divine demon, Jing Qian, appeared, interrupting the auctioneer's greedy scheme. Despite the intense, desperate strike, the divine demon remains utterly unfazed by the attack. He stared out at the vast, endless ocean, the rain washing over his solitary figure. The final, devastating clash erupts, a blinding explosion of light and force between the warriors. The divine demon, Jing Qian, stands alone, lowering his blood-soaked sword. The dust settled on the field of fallen masters, leaving only the divine demon standing victorious. Jing Qian paused his monologue, finding an unexpected connection in the mysterious woman's serene smile. The divine demon, Jing Qian, now faces the couple who provided him solace. When I lost my parents and everything collapsed, they gave meaning to my life again. Her gentle smile seemed to affirm the profound shift in his life's meaning. The years of blood-soaked revenge had concluded, and now, a single tear falls under the dawning sun. The dust settled, revealing the tragic outcome of the ultimate confrontation. Then, amidst the wreckage of his revenge, Jing Qian reflected on his journey. A life adrift, devoid of true anchors. That moment of pure, incandescent joy, a stark contrast to the blood-soaked path he had just walked. Gazing at the faintly rising sun, Jing Qian finally lowered the sword he had raised for vengeance. The final act of vengeance concluded. The weight of those years of slaughter finally brings tears to his eyes. The family reached out, offering him a life he had forgotten existed all along. Despite the fatal wound piercing his chest, the divine demon remained standing, an incandescent glow surrounding his battered form. Gazing at the faintly rising sun, he finally lowered the sword that had defined his long path of blood. The divine demon, Jing Qian, stands resurrected amidst the ashes of his vengeance. Zhang Qian dismisses the outrageous proposal with barely concealed contempt. This whole mess felt like a sickening spectacle. The divine demon, Zhang Qian, faces these new claimants, met only with speechless confusion. The divine demon, Zhang Qian, stares at the bewildering scene unfolding before him. Is this some kind of twisted afterlife? The utter shock of his supposed victim being alive sends immediate, raw disbelief through the onlookers. The indignant sister fiercely defends her brother's right, refusing to let the clan's legacy be stolen. Zhang Qian interrupts the callous negotiation, seeing the concerned faces of those who are clearly outsiders here. Then, gazing at the faintly rising sun, he finally lowered the sword that had defined his long, bloody quest. The divine demon, Zhang Qian, extends a hand, offering a proposition to the surprised onlookers. The divine demon, Zhang Qian, delivers his proposal regarding the clan's secrets. The divine demon, Zhang Qian, faces the shocked clan members, awaiting their response to his audacious offer. The divine demon Zhang Qian dramatically reveals himself, stopping the insidious clan machinations. The divine demon's imposing figure loomed as the two children reacted with confusion. Who was this stranger claiming inheritance rights? Zhang Qian stands amidst the aftermath, the divine demon's final words hanging heavy in the air. The divine demon's sudden appearance and grandiose claim left the children utterly bewildered. Under the bright, clear sky, the stage for their tense confrontation is set. Qiang Dobo's unsettling smile and outstretched hand confirmed his sinister intent, sealing the deadly agreement. Qiang Dobo's sudden, aggressive stomp shattered the ground beneath him. The regal woman casually dismisses the challenge with a flick of her wrist, while the younger onlookers react with varying degrees of shock. Despite the collapse, "I refuse to die, you fools. I will not let this body perish." His proclamation echoed with disdain as the world watched the divine demon descend. The menacing figure smiled, his words hanging heavily in the air after sealing the duel. They were gone as quickly as they arrived, leaving me to process the staggering truth of my current predicament. A thunderous impact resonates as the divine demon lands, readying himself for this strange new existence. The younger siblings look on, burdened by the situation and pleading with their elder brother. The divine demon prepared a dismissive counterattack, remembering his past skills. The shock of losing all internal energy sends the body reeling under the bright, accusatory sky. The realization of his current body's extreme weakness strikes him with visceral horror. The little girl's plea echoes, realizing the severity of her brother's condition. Seeing the imposing figure of the divine demon, the young girl could only stare up in shock. The younger sister's distress contrasted sharply with the defiant stare of the boy beside her. The shock of the revelation hung heavy in the tense air, forcing the crying child to scream her devastating truth. The younger boy, Dubo, sprints away, leaving the confused protagonist with a heavy, resigned sigh. The divine demon stands alone, the air thick with an unspoken challenge beneath the vast, indifferent sky. He processed the absurdity of his situation, feeling the sting of his family's ruin. The shocking realization of his current plight is punctuated by a loud, jarring sound echoing over the city at sunset. Standing before the ancestral monument, the weight of his past deeds and present reality settled upon him. The divine demon recalls the moment of his death, overwhelmed by raw, painful power. The divine demon's imposing presence burned against the fiery backdrop, locking eyes with the person before him. The sudden declaration of the duel was met with disbelief, but the reborn Demon King's focus snapped back to the immediate threat. Stunned by the realization of his current predicament, the protagonist demands answers about this impossible reality. The younger siblings watched with grim, protective expressions as their brother was dismissed. Even in this weakened state, the approaching assailant's reckless rush provoked an instinctual reaction from the divine demon. His shock over the sudden emptiness of his energy core escalated into a desperate confrontation. The words, "heavenly martial body," sink in, a devastating realization dawning as the duel rapidly approaches. The demon unleashes his terrifying power, a swirling inferno of rage and destructive intent. The divine demon, having accepted the duel, now questions the very accusation leveled against him. Dobo's arrogant challenge rings out. A duel must be fought without the aid of inner energy. The final, decisive clash explodes between the two combatants, tearing the very air around them. Dobo's anticipated mastery proves true as he effortlessly parries the strike, living up to his reputation. Dobo's face twists in cold triumph as he prepares to deliver the decisive blow. The powerful blow sent the small figure tumbling, leaving the divine demon momentarily confused by the unexpected resilience. The younger siblings react with fury to the accusation against their brother, demanding an immediate apology. Even as the former divine demon begins his training, an unexpected attack strikes him down again. Despite his boasts, the clash of powers sent the former divine demon reeling. Ignoring their panicked pleas, the true master prepares to meet his fate head-on. The true culprit, Cheong Dobo, watches as the crippled Wamujin plummets, the violent shock echoing in the quiet forest. As the memory solidifies, the current occupant of Wamujin's body feels an overwhelming sense of tragic futility. Despite the crushing realization of his body's limitations, the former divine demon erupts with raw defiance. The agonizing clash of powers erupts, showing the desperate state of Wamujin's fragile body against overwhelming force. The memory of that devastating strike, the seven wounds fist, surfaces as the insane reality takes hold. With a smug smirk, Cheong Dobo sealed their inevitable confrontation, staking the entire clan's legacy on the promised duel. The ominous terms of the duel were set, leaving the two figures standing amidst the fading light. The shock of realizing his true predicament sinks in, confirmed by his own hesitant response. The otherworldly blue energy, representing the soul or power, swirled around a ghostly figure above, falling like coins. The memory of his parents' tragedy focused his rage toward the Jianghua merchant group. The sound of impact rings through the vast, ornate hall as the men fall. He knelt before the ancestral tablets, the weight of Wamujin's tragic past pressing down. The former divine demon finds himself in this tragic new existence, resolving to honor the memory of his past. Now, he tends to a single flame, symbolizing the fragile hope for his new life. The past flashes violently, the tragedy of the parents and the crushing weight of responsibility. The loyal retainers watch in silent judgment as the young master stands before the ancestral altar. The younger siblings stand silently, the girl dissolving into heartbroken sobs. The weight of his parents' death, caused by his own crippling, crushed the surviving children. The weight of his ruined clan, the tragedy of his parents, presses down. The divine demon, having accepted his fate in this new world, now stands beneath the cold, vast expanse of the night sky. The former demon god slammed the history book shut, the sound echoing the finality of his decision. The divine demon stood victorious, but his past life's suffering lingered as a faint memory. Now, in this new shell, he held the first clue to understanding his fate. The divine demon reflects on his past life, where vengeance was perfectly fulfilled. Despite the tragic reality, he found simple drawings from his younger siblings, Wadojin and Wasoyan, wishing him well. His sister, Soyan, stares down, utterly confused by the shocking declaration of madness. The ghostly memory of his parents' fate flashes through his mind, a tragic end caused by his own downfall. These crude drawings, clearly from his younger siblings, offered a sliver of pure connection in this bizarre new reality. The world dissolved into a shocking flash of power as the divine demon executed his final, decisive blow. That cunning, knowing smile confirmed his acceptance of the duel. The intense, blinding energy confirms this new reality, a fresh start from the absolute bottom. The mysterious figure finished their statement, leaving the young Wamujin to contemplate the harsh realities of martial arts. Despite the agonizing pain, I focus my intent, forcing an energy core into this frail body. Perhaps it's because this body's innate martial aptitude is extraordinary, but I don't even need the usual steps. The sensation of that terrible attack, the one that defined his ruin, was now vividly returning. The steward and elder watch in disbelief as Wamujin collapses again. Enough. The frantic attempt to form an energy core was met with explosive, agonizing backlash. His newfound strength bursts forth violently, shattering the relative calm of the environment. The shocking revelation of his former identity as the divine demon was immediately met with Cheong Dobo's utter disbelief. The world outside rushes past in a dizzying blur as he reels from the shock. The sudden, violent lunge from above was met only by the sound of impact as the original body collapsed onto the richly patterned floor. Despite the servant's frantic warning, the possessed Wamujin remains disturbingly calm. The steward seemed relieved that Wamujin had stopped his outburst, even as the elder looked on with deep suspicion. The sickening crunch of the blow echoes as the attack lands, immediately drawing a stunned outcry. The realization of his potential physical limitation strikes, leading to a shocked query. The imposing figure's mocking laughter only solidified the new reality he found himself trapped within. The exertion of the mysterious counterattack made the man gasp, demanding more. The steward's concern turns to shock as Wamujin stirs, responding faintly to the shouts. As the elders prepare to abandon hope, the divine demons will flare against their defeatist attitude. Defiant even in collapse, the young master rejects their pity, shouting his will across the star-strewn night. The sound of the downpour emphasized the tense atmosphere as Wamujin stepped out into the storm. The rain fell heavily, washing over the vibrant blue hydrangeas and tall, dew-kissed leaves. The initial shock of his confinement dissipates as the reality of his situation sinks in. Wamujin, still heavily bandaged, remains resolute despite his precarious situation. His demand rings out, punctuated by a sudden surge of power in the tense atmosphere. The guard tries to snatch the makeshift weapon, a simple chopstick, from Wamujin's grip. The oppressive atmosphere of the loan sharks' territory made the young master sweat. Despite the chill, a massive surge of crackling blue energy erupts outward. The vice leader's contempt solidified. He immediately recognized Wamujin's lineage. The masked attendant was aghast as Wamujin finally revealed his intention to confront the Bango sect. The immediate need for a sword supersedes the family's desperate financial woes, forcing a drastic path. Wamujin's bandages hid a dangerous, knowing smile beneath his bamboo hat. The ensuing chaos breaks the tension, leaving only the sound of the downpour outside. The sheer, terrifying power unleashed by Wamujin caused the Bango vice leader to recoil in shock. The immediate need for a sword was overridden by the desperate reality of their mounting debt. Ignoring his servant's palpable fear, Wamujin stepped forward into the oppressive shadow of the loan sharks. The masked figure smiles, eyes glowing with sinister intent, ready to deliver his ultimatum. The intimidating guard of the Bango sect stands firm, his gaze daring Wamujin to make a move. The violent clash was instantaneous, leaving the enemy reeling from Wamujin's sudden, deadly display. The air crackles as the coin-like projectile flies, met by a surprised grunt from the heavy-set guard. Despite his servant's terror, Wamujin stands firm before the threatening Bango guards. The coin, his payment, hung suspended after the decisive throw. The guard, shocked by Wamujin's sudden, savage counter, can only register the impact. The shocking display of martial prowess has left everyone stunned, signaling a shift in the balance of power. The worried retainers hurry after Wamujin, clearly fearing his destination. The sound of eerie movement preceded the arrival of these mysterious figures, drawing attention toward the dimly lit tea-house entrance. The sheer shock of his opponent's skill left the Bango thugs momentarily speechless. The terrifying presence of the looming figure loomed over the two visitors. The ominous, torch-lit cavern dwarfed the assembled Bango members, awaiting instruction from their leader. The realization hit him, a stark moment of silence under the shadowy hat. The Bango thugs surround him, drawing their swords, but Wamujin clenches his fist, ready to unleash his recovered strength. A dark ceremony of sorts. Hands hold a small, flickering candle against the oppressive shadow. The Bango enforcers surrounded the terrified messenger, weapons drawn, asserting their dominance. The intimidating vice leader Ma Jungbo steps forward, ready to confront the young master. The confrontation was set against the cavern's imposing backdrop, the air thick with unspoken threats as Wamujin stood ready. A sudden, sharp realization breaks through the tension of the confrontation. The subordinates immediately bowed, recognizing the dangerous nature of the confrontation before them. The dust settled from the previous exchange as Wamujin assumed his fighting stance, drawing a makeshift weapon. The overwhelming force of the chopstick strike reduced his opponent to sheer terror. The counter-strike was a blur of dark energy, impossibly fast. The disciples' frantic efforts to dodge his master's overwhelming power continued in a dizzying flurry. The unexpected burst of light met the guard's strike head-on, leaving the attacker utterly stunned by the counter. The opponent recoiled in disbelief, shouting his fury at the unexpected, swift counter. The weight of his recent victory settled upon him, a palpable surge of raw power. With a chilling focus, he flicks a golden object, his eyes burning with intent. The lone shark leader issued a chilling command. Finish him. Wamujin, now armed, executes a swift, aggressive downward slash against his aggressor. The desperate block with the chopsticks meets the vicious swing of the blade head-on. The clash of their improvised weapons sends shockwaves through the tight space. Since I cannot match his power, I need to stay mobile. The shocking impact rings out as Wamujin effortlessly meets the attack. The force of Wamujin's unexpected counterattack sends his opponent reeling back in shock. The enraged guard retaliates with a furious, swift kick, his frustration boiling over. The opponent recoiled in absolute shock from the sudden, unexpected maneuver. The relentless flurry of strikes forced his opponent into a dizzying, desperate retreat. The clash erupted violently, sending his opponent reeling backward amidst a shower of debris. The terrifying display of power sent the servants immediately prostrating themselves in fear. The servants' terror was palpable, yet Wamujin pressed forward, shaking off the concern. Despite the servants' growing alarm, Wamujin insists he is perfectly capable of handling the situation. The overwhelming purple energy surges, a devastating strike descending upon his foes. The clash of weapon and chopstick erupts in a blinding, violent flash of energy. I will settle this now. The imposing figure radiated a chilling aura as he prepared his strike. The vice leader, seeing his intimidation fail, finally draws his own blade, ready for the confrontation. The sudden impact sends the opponent reeling backward, light radiating from the clash. The intense clash of weapons explodes in a blinding flash of crimson and blue light. Despite lacking a proper blade, he moved with lethal intent, the substitute weapon glowing with fierce energy. The duel explodes into blinding light as their attacks meet, the air itself fracturing under the force. The chopstick killer lunges, eyes burning with lethal intent, ready to demonstrate the power he disdains. Wamujin's unexpected move exploits the slightest opening, shattering his opponent's defense with blinding speed. He recalled the shocking efficiency of the match, even noting the flawless counter. The chopstick killer met the blade head-on, a blur of motion and sprayed blood. Wamujin's unexpected counter forces his opponent into a desperate, clumsy attack with a drawn sword. He flips his makeshift weapons, the cheap chopsticks now humming with deadly intent. The force of the counter-strike erupts, eliciting a raw, guttural cry of impact. The fight culminates in a brutal, shocking blow, silencing the opponent's threats with finality. The relentless purple energy erupts as he strikes down, demonstrating that underestimated tools can still deliver lethal force. The Bango thug mocked Wamujin's capability, still underestimating the young master's intent. His denial met with aggressive action. The opponent unleashes a furious, swift counter-strike. The impact was instantaneous, a blur of motion cutting through the air towards his shocked opponent. The chopstick killer unleashed a fierce, purple-flamed strike, determined to prove his power. The infamous Black Hand Twin Killer Power Heavenly Martial Moon Slaying Arts unleashes its ultimate move. The true depth of his hidden power was finally revealed as he stared down his opponent. The force of the blow, shrouded in dark purple energy, sent the guard reeling in surprise. The previous strike was evaded, leaving his attacker utterly shocked by Wamujin's unexpected skill. The chopstick killer unleashes a blinding, heavy-hitting punch, the true force of his street skills now revealed. The ensuing clash sent shockwaves through the space, the guard reeling from the sheer force. The enraged vice leader struck out, but Wamujin deflected the blow with shocking ease. The silent figure knelt, a spectral presence gloating just behind him. The heavy weight of the weapon barely registered as he gripped the staff, readying for the first real test. The underlings report their success in dealing with the Bengo lackeys, a display of power the young master did not expect. The interrogated man, trembling under pressure, is forced to finally confess the truth. Wamujin, though battered and masked, confirmed that the Bengo lackeys were dealt with severely. The captured man, cornered, finally yielded the full, damning truth of the contract. The masked man brandishes the dice, issuing a brutal ultimatum to silence his captive. Wamujin's sudden violence had already left their lackeys incapacitated for weeks. The captured loan shark stammers, finally cornered after revealing the sinister plot. The dice settled, their glow illuminating the tense air before the man's stunned reaction. The masked men huddled around the table, awaiting the next word from their shadowy leader. He concluded the confession, demanding to know the spoils of their scheme. The young master examines the retrieved contract, its details illuminated by an ethereal glow. The masked figure leaned forward, demanding answers about the conspiracy and the Cheonghwa merchant group. The masked conspirators sat, awaiting the next crucial piece of information in their dark scheme. The young master paused, a thoughtful hum escaping as he touched his bandaged face. The masked leader remains unmoved, while his associate urgently whispers a secret nearby. With the debts settled, the man rushed away into the downpour, the urgency of his mission paramount. The sound effects emphasize the heavy, sudden impact as the chest lands. Wamujin's victory was swift, leaving the Bengo lackeys reeling and broken for weeks. The young master examines the sheer volume of gold they just secured. The masked leader urged his subordinate forward, confidence radiating as the gold was secured. The tense confrontation breaks as the culprits, marked by their dark cloaks, finally retreat into the downpour. The debt settled, he stared down the moneylenders, a chilling promise lingering in the air. The menacing fist slams down, a harsh punctuation mark to the unfolding conspiracy. The young master steps out into the downpour, ready to face whatever comes next. A shocked cry echoes across the grounds as the imposing structure looms under the dark night. The tense confrontation escalates as a critical detail is noticed amidst the conflict. The mention of an unorthodox alliance, the Sozal sect, visibly startles the young master. The young master, cloaked and shadowed, confronts the steward about the urgency of their financial predicament. The young master dismisses the debt concerns, showing them the heavy chest of borrowed funds. With the immediate danger averted, the masked figure offered a final, taunting farewell. The terrifying presence of the young master descended upon the remaining lackeys with brutal force. With the debts partially settled, the mysterious figure prepares for the next move, taking necessary items from the darkened room. His veiled expression remained impassive as the gravity of the situation settled in. The young master finished his explanation, leaving the children in shocked silence. The young master's words were unexpectedly reassuring, causing the siblings to look up from their hiding spot. His masked, burning eyes promised retribution, the sheer force of his will filling the room. The debt secured under the Cheonghwa merchant group's scheme had been brutally calculated, leading to this grim accounting. As Mujin's dominance was established, the harsh realities of his new training began. The warriors struggled under the immense weight of the retrieved supplies, bringing them into the courtyard. The heavy weights drop hard, striking the ground with a dull, resonant thud. A sharp crack echoed as the tension finally broke the fragile composure of the loan sharks. Wamujin bursts in, demanding confirmation that the money has arrived as planned. The initial weights, 50, 80, and 110 jin, were presented for assessment. The heavy weaponry was finally moved, but the effort left them utterly exhausted and straining. The young master grips his weapon, readying himself for the first challenge, focused on the 50 mark. Wamujin swiftly strikes, eliciting a choked cry of pain from the indebted lackey. The exhausted clan member, having revealed their conspiracy, collapses onto the cold floor, the tension momentarily broken. Faced with the sheer impossible weight, his desperation boiled over into raw defiance. The sheer weight of the sword made it impossible to lift with just one hand, forcing a desperate grip with both. The stunned underling could only stare as his master, badly bandaged, returned with the necessary funds. The young master, having secured the funds, prepares to demonstrate his newfound dedication. He lifts the heavy object, beginning the trial, determined to swing the 50 jin weight. The time for preparation is short. He has only 2 weeks left. His current body constitution is the opposite of the demonic arts, forcing a difficult choice. With an explosive upward slash, Wamujin unleashes the technique he must now master. The mysterious, raw power erupted as Wamujin prepared his first move against the heavy training weights. This overwhelming surge of internal energy. Is this the key? The heavy training yields an initial, clumsy swing against the bright blue sky. Amidst the tranquility, the young master played a melody, a brief respite before the storm. The young master watches the messenger, who maintains a rigid, almost ritualistic posture. The schemer smiles wide, fully revealing his malicious intent toward the great Flame clan heir. The heavy lifting was done. Now came the true test of strength. The mysterious, blindfolded figure declares their intent to show their true power, as Wamujin prepares for a musical confrontation. The culmination of the attack erupts in a furious, black ink splash. The sheer force of the technique sent him crashing down into the tiled ground. With the final declaration made, Wamujin planted his foot down decisively. Even with the raw power crashing down, he held firm, refusing to yield. The divine demon stares up at the bounty of firewood, having absorbed the essence of the heavenly martial BOP. The pain was immense, but the true test of the heavenly martial BOP technique was about to commence. The young master, collapsing from the strain, could only manage a final, sharp thud as he hit the ground. The first form, the solitary 9 declaration form, unleashes its full, breathtaking power. The masked swordsman unleashes the technique, the raw power momentarily overwhelming him. The technique culminates, proving that even the simplest form can cleave the very air around him. The overwhelming pressure of the heavenly martial BOP finally hits him, sweat beading despite the icy reception. This final, devastating sweep of the blade concluded the demonstration. The sheer force of the ultimate sword technique manifests as a devastating, shattering impact of pure crimson energy. After enduring the final, overwhelming surge, he could only groan in utter exhaustion. The opposing forces clash violently, the clash represented by sharp, contrasting arcs of light and dark energy. The final, explosive shockwave of the self-cleaving form radiates outward. Despite the overwhelming incoming force, he remained resolute, sweat beading on his brow. The blue energy converges, clashing violently against the core of the incoming attack. Despite the brutal exertion, he managed to rise, sweat pouring from his bandaged form. The impact explodes outward, marked by a searing, bright burst of energy and the visceral sound of a powerful clash. The sheer force of the technique overwhelmed his body, leaving him crumpled on the floor. The overwhelming force of the technique meets the incoming barrage, shattering the projectiles mid-flight. The initial barrage of training attacks from the heavenly martial art explodes outward, shattering the bamboo targets. This final, blinding strike declares that no defense can withstand the sword's raw edge. All complicated techniques fail to counter this ultimate simplicity. The golden binding snapped under the sheer, unstoppable force of the incoming technique. The sheer impact of the technique shattered the very ground beneath him. With a thunderous impact, the sword strike ripped through the air, sending the wooden target scattering. The final form, self-cleaving form, was complete, yet the master's expression remained strained. The technique completed its terrifying demonstration, fracturing the very essence of the energy being tested. The raw, primal energy of the technique violently erupts, shattering the heavy logs. The sword cleaves downward with monumental force, shaking the very foundation of the room. The overwhelming force of the technique brings the disciple to a frenzied, desperate outcry against the truth. The flickering candlelight cast long, somber shadows, perhaps marking an ominous vigil. The intensity of the heavenly martial bop reaches its zenith with a final, blinding strike. The raw power of the self-cleaving form unleashes, striking the stone lion dummy with incredible force. The ultimate form of this technique, the self-cleaving form, is now complete. The absolute force of the technique manifested as a blinding, echoing impact. The self-cleaving act is complete, finally granting him a true reason to wield the sword. The sound effect emphasizes the shattering impact as the form's essence is fully realized. The master stands tall as the exhausted disciple questions the mysterious, powerful technique he just witnessed. The disciples watched, wondering what impossible feat their young master had just witnessed. He composed himself, clearing his throat before speaking again. The master concludes the bizarre, overly dramatic explanation of the sword skill. The lingering question about the method hung in the air as the master offered a gesture of completion. The master declares the training complete. Even as the novice struggles for breath, the mastery level is quantified. After 1,000 swings, the body itself transforms. Xiangdobo will certainly try to take young master's life in 10 days. The master was done explaining the ultimate technique, leaving the disciple to ponder beneath the starry night. The force of the unseen blow causes the disciple to cry out in sudden alarm. The exhausted swordsman is defeated, left lying on the ground as his opponent looms over him. The exhausting practice is over. It's time to refuel now. The master's promise of meat for the coming days begins now, signaling a new focus. It's late, but let's eat. The young master finally taking sustenance after the ordeal. The tension over their survival momentarily breaks as the conversation shifts abruptly to dinner. He dismisses concerns over the cost, assuring them the funds will be procured later. He lay exhausted, his failed attempt at the final form leaving him on the ground, prompting a question about the bizarre nature of the technique. The young master was still eating, unconcerned by his worried subordinate's frantic outburst. The clash erupts, two forms colliding in a blinding exchange of spectral sword energy. The shocking confession hung in the air. My real identity is the divine demon. The shadowy figure stands before the imposing structure, the weight of the ultimate sword form still settling. When faced with such a drastic proposal, the disciple grasped at the fabric, clearly aghast. The gravity of the situation settles as the master sits in silent contemplation against the twilight sky. The master taps his disciple's head, punctuating the end of the intense lesson. The young swordsman collapses, utterly spent, as his master gently checks his swollen head. The master dismissed his servant's earlier outburst with a curt, "Then get out." Defeated, the other man could only concede. The intense battle concluded, leaving the warrior heavily bandaged but standing firm. The blue energy of the technique envelops him as a voice calls out the name. Wamujin. The tension breaks as someone begins pouring a warm beverage into a distinctive cup. The master calmly poured a drink, his visitor having just departed into the night. Wamujin took a slow, measured sip, seemingly contemplating the weight of his promises. The master, seated calmly, awaits my response to the bizarre sword legacy. The confrontation concluded, leaving a powerful, lingering impression of the technique just displayed. The sound of exertion echoed as the warrior entered, his presence commanding even in the dim light. Despite the physical gains from his training, he still worried about the flawed execution of his sword technique. The looming arts competition felt like a dark shadow over his solitary training. The children stood quietly, hands clasped, observing their older brother from the doorway. The massive blade, now merely an extension of his will, shimmered with latent energy as the children watched from the shadows. The young woman recoils, the devastating memory of her family's fate echoing loudly. Seeing these kids here reminds me of when I trained with my master. Mujin gently placed his hand on each of their heads, a rare moment of calm after his outburst. The young martial artist showed off his technique, earning surprised approval. But the younger siblings noted that his form was drastically different from brother Mujin's mastery. His master's gentle teaching echoes in his memory as he guides the younger children. The master's sharp instruction echoes the critical timing of returning to position. The master's visage materialized, whispering the name of the forgotten breathing technique. Pupil. As the internal conflict subsided, the master's vital teachings echoed in his mind. A manic grin breaks through the bandages. He declares his absolute confidence. Seeing the children appear, Mujin offers a gentle, masked smile, beckoning them closer. A sudden, sharp sound of impact punctuates the tense silence between the worried children. The downpour continues, washing over the architecture and the vibrant hydrangeas below. Sweat dripped from his bandaged face, his determined gaze fixed on an unseen future. With a decisive thud, the young master planted his foot, ready to confront the challenge. The young master, now resolute, brings the heavy weapon down in a punishing motion. The forceful exhale poured out all the internal energy gathered in his body at once. The primal force finally connected, shattering the obstacle into glowing fragments. Success! The flickering candles cast long shadows, a quiet vigil for those lost in the past. The commander's sharp foot strike impacts the floor, demonstrating immediate, silent aggression. The powerful exhale pours out all gathered internal energy at once, defining this qigong. The powerful impact resonated as the sword met the stone, soaking in the relentless downpour. While Mujin channeled his focus, the glowing lines of energy marking his resurgence. The challenger's arrogance shatters under the sudden, terrifying crimson force. The sound of the heavy iron walk striking the ground punctuates the downpour. The powerful exhalation releases the gathered internal energy in one explosive motion. Even as Mujin resolved to win, the relentless rain continued outside. The moment of intense focus continues as he meticulously selects his portion. A sudden, jarring noise broke the silence as Mujin appeared, eliciting a shocked reaction. The younger brother, still visibly concerned, watched as Mujin entered the dimly lit kitchen area. Despite the intense pain and the children's worries, Mujin endured the treatment. The servant voiced his doubt, recalling the legendary status of the Wudong Bexian technique. The brothers are interrupted, their confrontation hanging tense in the suddenly charged air. The air thrummed with a palpable energy as Mujin moved across the courtyard. As Mujin strode away, the broken bamboo littering the floor hinted at the intensity of his solitary practice. His intense focus on training immediately clashed with the mundane reality of his surroundings. He triumphantly declared his need for the larger training ground. The heavy strike reverberated under the vast, bright sky, echoing the focused power behind the movement. The sheer intensity of the confrontation silenced the onlookers, their aggression palpable in the charged air. The sudden intrusion of guests breaks the flow of his solitary training session. Joel Boyng, the Death Squad commander, stepped forward, his expression dripping with insincere confidence. The Death Squad commander's sudden, intense aura made the other warriors visibly recoil in shock. His assertion rings out, a challenge vibrating with raw, unrestrained power. The powerful stance, honed by rigorous practice, felt right under the bright summer sky. His furious rant reached a crescendo, mocking Mujin's perceived weakness. The Death Squad commander watches with a chilling, bandaged grin. The intimidated guards scattered, clearing the way as Mujin stepped forward. Boyng, the Death Squad commander, stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the young master. The commander sneers, questioning Mujin's sudden aggressive stance. The master's cryptic words echoed as Mujin looked upward, his resolve hardening under the specter of the past. The confrontation escalated as Boyng, the Death Squad commander, challenged Mujin's sudden shift to martial arts training. The commander narrowed his eyes, meeting the challenge with cold scrutiny. The intensity of the clash erupted, the sound of metal meeting force echoing between them. The Death Squad commander's menacing glare confirmed his challenge to the air. Boyng, the Death Squad commander, glared, questioning Mujin's sudden arrogance. His determined stance and barely contained energy met the sneering challenge head-on. The concentrated energy crackled around the hand gripping the sword's hilt, signifying the intense focus required. With the master's words echoing, he swung the heavy iron walk with explosive power. The oppressive aura of his sheer strength radiated outward, prompting a hesitant response. With the duel over, Masik retrieves a clan token, glowing with residual power. The young master, having weathered the storm of accusation, now prepares for the real confrontation. The young master, now fully focused, grips his massive, shimmering weapon. The powerful strike concluded, leaving the sword deeply embedded, while nearby, the talisman seemed to shimmer with residual energy. The clash reached its zenith, a blinding arc of crimson energy meeting the ground with shattering force. The young master's imposing grip settled upon the defeated man's head. The accuser demands will stop his evasive, strange techniques and face him with his proper weapon. The impact unleashes a wave of energy, forcing the young master into a desperate, recoiling evasion. The air fractured as the young master's power overwhelmed his opponent, sending him flying. The clash was imminent as the young master prepared to unleash his power. The sudden burst of power, shrouded in crimson energy, violently repels the incoming strike. The young master, finally gripping his weapon, prepares to unleash the devastating technique. Despite the concession, the young master's gaze held an unbreakable, burning resolve. Driven back by the sheer force, his arrogance shattered by the display of power. His eyes, no longer clouded, burn with a fierce, unwavering resolve. The shockwave of his impact reverberated, shaking even the opponent's core energy. The opponent's sword attack, aimed high, was met only by a tightly clenched fist. His entire being recoiled, realizing the true, devastating power of the technique unleashed. He throws his decisive blow, the raw conviction in his strike undeniable. The crushing impact sends blood scattering as the blow connects with devastating force. The confrontation culminates as Wa delivers a devastating, fiery blow, shocking his opponent. The young master, bandaged yet powerfully built, raises a fist toward the bright, open sky. The attacker reels back, his arrogant display shattered by the sheer force and unexpected technique. The sheer impact of the technique sent the opponent hurtling backward. The sheer, unexpected power of the young master's true technique left them stunned and speechless. The force of the attack sent the elder sprawling, his sword clattering away. As his horrified pupil cried out, the young master slams his foot down, the raw power momentarily shaking the very ground. The young master, now fully transformed, simply asks for any last words or advice. The shocked retainer could only stare, witnessing the young master's transformation. The realization of their failure struck the onlookers like a physical blow. The attacker stands over the vanquished foe, whose surrender begins to spill out amidst the blood on the earth. He accepts the elder's parting gesture, his newly resolved gaze fixed on the path ahead. The internal struggle ended, replaced by resolute focus. His opponent concedes, and the training ceases. The young master's transformation culminated in a powerful, skyward reach, signaling a shift in the battle's outcome. The young master gave the order, directing everyone towards the adjacent training grounds. Masik, still processing the shift in his young master's demeanor, could only stare at the bandaged figure. The Yomo clan's compound lay quiet under the brilliant morning sun, a facade of grandeur masking its decline. The former challenger could only roar in shock as the aura of the young master surged. Masik's shocked outburst was immediately followed by the other disciples' desperate plea. As Wa commanded, the entourage quickly moved toward the adjacent training grounds. This newfound resolve presents a true warrior's opportunity, cutting through past stagnation. The concept of opportunity was raised, but doubts lingered about the timing. Silhouetted against the bright sky, the newly resolved young master stands firm, ready for whatever comes next. The young master, resolute and changed, commands the disciples to move to the training grounds next door. The elders, having decided the clan's fate, perform their final rites in solemn silence. The internal shock subsides as the enemy realizes the truth in the words spoken. The sheer force of the young master's technique shook the elder to his core. He could only offer a pained admission. Elder Joe remained silent, lost in the shadow of what the young master's transformation meant for their future. A solemn figure approached the altar, the flickering candlelight illuminating their quiet reverence for what was lost. As the young master finally found his resolve, the elders prepared for their solemn duty before the ancestral tablets. Masik stared, his initial apprehensions slowly giving way to cautious concern for the young master. The necessary items for their departure, scrolls and ledgers, rest silently in the dim light. The newly determined young master dismisses his retainer, signaling the training session is over. With the dust settled, the loyal men approach the victorious warrior, ready to secure their meager remaining assets. The elder gravely confirms the upcoming duel with the Qianghua Merchant Guild. The weight of their coming confrontation with the Qianghua Guild settled heavily between them. While War rested, his sister and he dreamed peacefully, oblivious to the imminent upheaval. The lavish meal on the table contrasted sharply with the worried glances of the servants nearby. The ensuing silence was broken only by the quiet meeting between the two figures at the sunlit table. The dust settled, revealing the young master standing tall, his demeanor completely transformed. The echoing sound of contact rings out as the young master's true strength begins to manifest. The young master's imposing presence silenced any lingering doubt from his followers. The young master has spoken, his decree silencing any lingering doubt among the elders. The elder bows deeply, acknowledging the new direction the young master is taking. Masik remains silent, processing the elder's heavy decision regarding their imminent departure. The resolve in his eyes solidifies. There will be no retreat now. The young master stood firm, accepting the challenge of leaving the training ground. With a resolute declaration, young Master Wall leads the way toward their confrontation. The confrontation reaches its peak as the brush is brandished beneath the bright midday sky. The immense crowd gathered, eager to place their final wagers on the outcome of the duel. The witness, Hanig Gang, reviews the formal agreements, his expression calculating amidst the grand setting. The crowd murmured, wondering if the erratic behavior pointed to genuine madness or a planned provocation. Wamujin's confidence was absolute, even as his opponent stared back in stunned silence. The clash explodes into kinetic energy, obscuring the immediate surroundings in smoke and force. The clash erupted in a blinding burst of power, the air itself fracturing under the sheer force. Despite the looming duel, Wamujin seemed utterly unbothered, savoring his sweet treat with a casual smirk. The air crackled as Hanig Gang, the impartial witness, took his place between the two factions. The young master's strange composure during the exchange only fueled the servants' mounting anxiety. The confrontation begins as the first combatant arrives, shading themselves with a vibrant red parasol. Even as Wamujin pressed his overwhelming attack, the spectator remained composed, slowly drawing back his parasol. The assembled faction stood ready as the air crackled with anticipation. His sinister smile confirmed the Qianghua Merchant Company's intent to steal the Yoma family's secrets. The momentum shifts dramatically as the dual principals arrive, accompanied by the designated witness. Wamujin, now armed and focused, prepares for the final, decisive blow. The ritual fire roared, a final, dramatic signal that the honorable duel was truly underway. With conviction fully settled, Wamujin prepares to unleash his power above the dueling grounds. The master of ceremonies proclaims the imminent start of this fateful duel. The challenger's intense focus snaps the duel into motion, heralded by a blinding burst of energy. The arrogant challenger gloats, spreading his arms wide, basking in the attention before the fight begins. His opponent, however, looked completely unfazed, meeting his smug expression with a chilling, confident grin. His certainty hardened. He would not just win, he would finish this opponent decisively. Now, with absolute certainty, he declared his intention to end the fight permanently. The witnesses stood ready, their expressions a mix of awe and confusion regarding the spectacle unfolding before them. The stage is set beneath the vast, bright sky. The two combatants stand poised for the duel. The Qianghua representative, having made his bold proclamation, awaits a response from the stunned Yoma subordinate. The intensity of the situation causes the older man to react strongly to the younger man's surprising revelation. The assembled crowd watches, utterly stunned, as the gravity of the situation hits them. Sheer madness. The official calls out, ready to commence the highly anticipated martial duel. He draws the massive blade, his expression shifting to one of cold, ruthless confidence. The crushing blow lands, metal screaming against metal, promising a decisive end. The massive clash of force erupted with a deafening sound. The clash began, an exchange of immense power as the swords met with blinding force. The sheer speed of the blow caught the opponent entirely by surprise. The clash erupts, a devastating collision of raw power against a fierce, crimson strike. The spectators erupted in pure shock as the unexpected, sudden burst of power hit them. The clash was imminent, and Wamujin, drawing his massive blade, seemed ready for annihilation. Even after assessing the strength gap, his resolve hardened. He would finish this fight decisively. Wamujin descended with chilling intent, his sword raised high, promising absolute finality. The clash reached a blinding peak, two forces tearing the air itself. The clash of intentions erupted into a blinding, earth-shattering collision of force. The anticipated duel explodes into a blinding flash of golden power. The Qianghua Company members mockingly celebrated their presumed victory, while the Yunhua young master drained his flask beneath the open sky. Despite the overwhelming power displayed, the observer in the crimson robe remains unexpectedly composed. He quietly dismisses the perceived advantage, his focus seemingly locked on the knowledge held within the imposing red book. The clash erupted, a silent promise of brutal finality in his eyes. The final, deadly blow connected with bone-shattering force. The overwhelming strike finally connects, forcing Wamujin into a desperate, downward spiral. Wamujin unleashes a devastating overhead strike with impossible force. The clash erupted, a blinding flash of overwhelming force meeting the calculated strike. The confident foe locks eyes with Wamujin, delivering a chilling promise of violence. With all resolve focused on the kill, the final moment of confrontation is here. The young master's intent solidified, his gaze burning with murderous resolve. The formal challenge is set. The clash between these two houses is now officially underway. The clash erupts, ice blue energy meeting crimson force in a blinding collision. The sheer force of the collision throws the young master violently backward. The observers watched, stunned by the unexpected turn of events unfolding below them. His shocking realization causes an audible gasp of disbelief. As the gravity of the situation settles upon him, the momentum shifts violently as Wamujin drives his attack skyward. Even with this monstrous power, the outcome is still his. Regardless of past strength, he has determined this attack will be the end of it. The world dissolved into a crimson blur as Wamujin unleashed his full, hidden power. Wamujin gathered his energy, the blue aura intensifying around him as he prepared his next move. The duel commenced, pitting the blue energy of the Yunhua family against the fiery red intensity of the Qianghua Company. His resolve solidifies. This clash must end with the death of his opponent. The silent, misty mountains loomed over the structure, marking the successful, albeit tense, arrival. The carriage, carrying the unconscious boys, finally arrives at the gate. The long journey to the Walklands domain was finally complete. The steward paused, awaiting the next command from the newly victorious young Master Wa. The elder, having absorbed the news, could only process the gravity of the situation with visible distress. And let's proceed to our agreed meeting place. The overwhelming victory concluded. The protagonist could finally breathe, looking up at the vast, uncaring sky. The clash erupts with blinding light as their ultimate strikes connect violently. The shock of the young master's power settled, leaving the escorts tense and worried. The decisive clash erupted, red energy meeting blue in a violent surge of power. Despite his desperate effort, the young master was clearly overwhelmed by the unseen martial master's power. The final, devastating strike connected, echoing the young master's raw power. The desperate cries of warning rang out as the decisive moment approached. Wei Yian executes his terrifying preemptive step, a final, decisive move. The final, devastating strike connects with blinding force, marking the true end of the duel. The assembled retainers watched, utterly stunned by the devastating display of their young master's might. The blinding flash of the blade was met with a defiant shout, underscoring the sheer force of the clash. The devastating force of the final strike lands, eliciting a painful groan from the overpowered opponent. The final, devastating blow connected, shaking the very air around them. The final, overwhelming strike connects with brutal force, shattering the last vestiges of resistance. The defeated youth finally comprehends the vast gulf between them. This overwhelming power is pure energy. The imposing figure's silent command hung heavy, forcing the onlookers to react. His final strike descends, mocking the slow gathering of his opponent's core energy. His raw fury fueled his final, agonizing maneuver, but the gap in their power was already clear. The devastating power of the peerless Nine Swords unleashes its second form, weapon destruction. Struck down, the defeated warrior questioned the sheer futility of his final desperate attacks. The decisive blow lands, shattering the opponent's guard with brutal force. The defeated fighter's last defiant thought boiled down to pure, helpless fury at his core. Less victor. The final, devastating strike connects, marked by a crimson arc and scattering blood. The final, devastating blow lands, a brutal conclusion to the long-held grudge. The devastating impact resonated through the air, a final, brutal exclamation point on the fight. The young Master Hua brings down his accumulated inner energy in one devastating, downward strike. The messenger pigeon delivery cuts through the chief steward's dismissive questioning. The steward and the younger man watched in stunned silence, still catching their breath from the previous confrontation. The brutal impact leaves the vanquished young Master Hua sprawled in a crimson mess. The devastating impact sends a gruesome spray of blood across the defeated opponent's robes. The final blow lands, splattering blood against the sky, a visual declaration of his victory. The chief steward's casual disregard for Elder Zhou's fate sent a wave of absolute horror through her. With the battle concluded, he carries the small form away, the weight of the deed settling upon him. The decisive blow lands with startling, kinetic force. The final, decisive blow landed with brutal force, leaving the victim shattered. The victor stands over the fallen, a looming shadow poised to strike the final, humiliating blow. The victor stands poised, his massive blade already stained with the brutal conclusion of their confrontation. The victor, young Master Hua, stands ready, his massive blade hefted over his shoulder. Then, and with impossible speed, the victor plummeted after his opponent. The victorious young master was hand-clenched with absolute finality against his fallen foe. Overwhelmed by the brutal victory, a profound, vengeful oath erupts from her. The stunned reaction of the onlookers confirmed the terrifying speed of young Master Hua's victory. The final strike lands, a burst of terrifying blue energy signaling the end of the confrontation. The stunned faces of the defeated guards reflected the sheer power young Master Hua had just displayed. The powerful display of swordsmanship concludes as the two remaining figures react with shock. The defeated rival steward stammered, caught off guard by the young Master Hua's sudden, cold confrontation. The victor stands bathed in blinding light, his massive blade reflecting the stunning display of power. The chilling implication of his words hung heavy, making the listener stammer. The victorious young master's sinister smile confirmed his complete dominance over the situation. The steward nervously noted that only a small remainder of the task was left. The man in black stands resolute, his face grim as he considers the terrible stakes. The battle concluded amidst a fiery sunset over the jagged peaks. The conversation about the recent battle concludes, and the focus shifts to the aftermath and their departure. The hurried message reveals the disastrous failure of their secret plan. The children urged the carriage forward, leaving the solemn escort behind to his duty. The young master stands ready beneath the bright sky, a silent promise of retribution on his mind. The chief questions the unsettling terminology, clearly referring to the prior declaration. The vice-sec leader, stepping forward nervously, admits his new rank. The chief's worry was evident, but the young master simply brushed off his concerns with characteristic assurance. The chief's lingering worry followed the young master as he departed for the perilous meeting. He departed Jahaikor, a confident smirk playing on his lips as he headed towards trouble. Arriving at the Bango sect's lair, the young master steps forward under the dazzling morning sun. The thug's uneasy grin faltered as he waited for the young master's response. The young master's reputation preceded him, leaving the Bango sect subordinate speechless before the confrontation began. Masak remained anxious, watching the young master stride confidently toward his fate. The quiet courtyard suggested the Bango sect's usual business had stopped. Perhaps everyone was out placing bets on the duel. The underling could only respond with stunned disbelief at his master's sudden, aggressive shift. The stunned lackeys could only watch as the young master's presence dominated the room. The stunned lackey could only process the blinding speed, wondering if he had just witnessed the young master's power again. His approval felt like a cold validation of his hardened nature. The subordinates swallowed hard, sensing the shift in power. The former young master has been replaced by someone entirely new, cold, yet eerily steady. The young master moves with silent, practiced grace, landing unseen upon the roof beams. His imposing presence filled the room as he confronted the assembled Bango sect members. The ominous shadow loomed, a silent, powerful presence descending upon the surprised men. The young master's stern gaze surveyed the quaking thugs. Guys. His aggressive challenge met only with his opponent's utter calm. The young master moves with terrifying speed, an invisible, sharp force cutting through the air. The young master finishes his chilling command, ensuring the others face the consequences. The swift, decisive blow struck true, sending the initial assailant reeling from the impact. The death-black crow understood the chilling truth. This was no ordinary opponent. The sect leader's threats were meaningless. The young master felt nothing from the aged opponent. The black crow, clearly enraged by the interruption, unleashes a furious counter-assault. The young master slammed down with unstoppable force, cracking the very foundation beneath them. The former leader, now just another victim, stares up in utter shock as the true threat looms. A blinding discharge of purple energy erupts as the fight reaches its ferocious peak. The sect leader's effortless speed shattered his opponent's confidence, leaving him aghast. The rage boils over, demanding one final act of violence. A violent, decisive action shatters the preceding moment. The sheer force of his presence made the Bango sect members recoil in shock. The defeated subordinate could only spit out a curse against the newly arrived, utterly changed young master. The brutal, crimson-tinged impact lands, shattering the illusion of mercy. His unwavering gaze promised swift retribution to anyone who challenged him. The plea for mercy was met with brutal finality as the debt was violently collected. The former boss, utterly defeated and bleeding, gasped, acknowledging the young master's overwhelming power. Having broken the sect leader, firm approval confirmed this man finally understood his place. The young master's terrifying intent erupted, crushing the subordinate under the weight of his impending violence. His terrifying resolve manifests as the oppressive aura of the Bango sect leader is violently shattered. His desperate plea for mercy was met with cold inquiry as the young master sought out the next in line. The sect leader's sudden declaration left his subordinate stammering in stunned disbelief. The total accumulated profit from manipulation alone, 7,000 gold nyang, is precisely what equals all his assets. A single, blinding strike silenced the Bango sect leader immediately. The decisive blow lands, a brutal confirmation that this debt is being settled immediately. The young master stood imposing, stepping forward as the subordinate braced himself for the confrontation. The merchant leader, rattled by the young master's chilling indifference, barely managed to deliver his message. The young master delivers his final verdict. The debt collector lives, but the consequences for the Bango sect are far from over. The final tally includes the sect leader's assets and the total organization's worth, even throwing in an odd, emotional damages fee. The subordinate scrambles to comply with the young master's absolute demand for immediate documentation. The young master coolly demands to negotiate the price for their lives. The hired men, now terrified, stood silently, realizing the gravity of the situation. The shocked merchant leader's desperate plea was cut short by the young master's chilling authority. The surprised subordinate can only gawk at the immense stacks of wealth now amassed before them. The young master's target was clear: the ill-gotten gains of the Bango sect. The leader reacts with surprise, recalling Wa's involvement with the Sozal sect. His terrified gasp was swallowed by the sheer, chilling aura of the young master. The former subordinate, still terrified, stammered out his new rank. Chai Wunjil finally faced the source of his impending doom, sizing up this frightening new opponent. The young master stood amidst the Bango sect's stockpiled wealth, ready to reclaim what was taken. His gesture was a clear dismissal, asserting final authority over the indebted man. He walks away from his worries, heading straight for the troublesome Bango sect. The merchant group leader, rattled by the duel's outcome, now faces a direct interrogation. The Crimson Sword sect's alliances, even those intimidating brothers, meant nothing to him. Kukuku. We'll be back before sunrise, my lord. Wamujin's terrifying promise hung in the air, a wave of vengeful power washing over the sect leader. The spirit of the Yomwa clan, once mighty, is now painted across the landscape by a decisive breaststroke hand. As the threat was neutralized, a moment of quiet camaraderie was shared amongst the survivors. The glory days of the Yomwa clan, where the master Yomje commanded legions of loyal martial artists, seemed like a fading dream now. The shadow of Yomje's past glory began to merge with the present dread, as if a terrifying force was summoning an echo of that power. The chaos subsided, leaving only a flickering light in the dark aftermath. The horrifying realization dawns as the protagonist sees his brother's retreating figure merge with the legend of the Yomje. The head steward, seeing the past echo in the present, could only utter a fragmented thought. The shock deepens as he calls out for the head steward, recognizing the dire situation. Wamujin moved with blinding speed, disarming the initial threat in a terrifying blur of motion. The air crackles with tension as figures clash silently beneath the crimson, shadowed canopy. As the final assassin lunged, Wamujin's hidden strength erupted, bathed in a terrifying, blood-red aura. The captured warrior roared in frustrated fury, realizing the tables had decisively turned. The air crackled with the sound of a devastating sweep, painting the scene in an ominous crimson glow. The final blow was about to land, a terrifying display of raw power unleashed in the crimson light. Wamlegion's swift, devastating strike neutralized the threat, forcing the remaining assassins to halt. The assassins swarm, their orders echoing with murderous intent against the advancing Wamujin. The crimson energy flared outward, a terrifying testament to the power Wamujin unleashed. The young master unleashes a devastating blow, silencing the assassin's taunts with raw, burning power. The sound of intense, glowing energy erupted as Wamujin moved like a vengeful phantom. The surviving assassin, shocked by the carnage, could only scream in terror. The masked assailant lunged with deadly intent, but his attack was met with utter disbelief. With a furious roar, Wamujin swung his blade, the red aura indicating sheer, unbridled power. The air fractured with a sound of overwhelming impact as the young master struck. The assassin's blade swept down, meeting an impossible, blazing counterattack. The final, fatal blow descended upon the stunned assailant. The assassin's blade meets its mark, as the enemy commander bellows an order to eliminate the rest. The assassin moves in for the kill, but Elder Joe struggles against the sudden, brutal strike. A blinding, crimson flash, the sound of a swift, decisive strike echoes in the darkness. The assassin, caught mid-strike, recoiled with a visceral, pained cry. The raw power erupts in crimson, a shield shielding the young ones from immediate danger. A sudden movement. The younger sibling clings to the protector, sensing his return. The young master, Wamulin, unleashes a decisive, swift strike against his opponent. With the assassins subdued, Wamujin's silent, terrifying power erupted in a blinding display. The sudden, overwhelming shock of Wamujin's appearance silences the threat. The figure descends like a vengeful shadow, their true form beginning to emerge from the gloom. The captured assassin stammers, desperate for a lifeline after Wamjure's brutal display. The air itself seems to rip as Wamujin unleashes his hidden power. The battle reached its peak as the final assassin lunged, provoking Wamujin's lethal counter. Wamujin's determined focus erupted as the battle raged around his siblings. The devastating clash erupted, shards of shattered steel scattering as Wamujin unleashed his explosive counterattack. With impossible speed, Wamujin parried the desperate, lunging blow. The assassin, stunned by the sudden, terrifying display of power, could only utter a bewildered "huh?" With terrifying speed, Wamujin unleashed a strike, his presence overwhelming. Everyone attacked. Kill him. The assassin surged forward as Wamujin drew his blade, ready to meet the onslaught. The calm was shattering as Wamujin unleashed his power against the descending assassins. The fifth form unleashes a crimson storm of power, a technique too swift and devastating to comprehend. The young master's decisive strike left the assassin reeling in shock and agony. The attacker unleashes a furious, desperate cry as the clash intensifies. The young master's counterattack was a blinding, lethal flash of crimson intent. Even as his allies were overwhelmed, Wamujin met the terrifying creature head-on. The swift, crimson blade descended, punctuated by a sharp, deadly impact. Wamujin's relentless, blazing fury unleashed a torrent of death, silencing the attackers with terrifying speed. The youth's eyes burned with a terrifying, blood-red intensity, a clear shift into lethal focus. The masked figure emerged from the shadowed bamboo grove, his presence commanding. A stern hand quickly covered the young one's eyes, commanding silence amid the chaos. The young lord, seeing his sibling safe, erupts with focused intensity. Wamujin stepped forward, his imposing presence silencing the bamboo grove. The terrified siblings clung to each other, utterly helpless. The reassuring weight of his brother's hand settled upon his head, a silent promise of safety. Wamujin's chilling gaze locks onto the boy he just saved. The young master's chilling words echoed, shattering the tense silence under the watchful moon. Wamujin, swift as the wind, easily dispatches another assailant. With the threat eliminated, the young master's decisive command cut through the tense night air. The terrified survivor confirms the identity of the mastermind behind the attack. Wamujin, standing over the defeated assassins, demanded answers about who hired them. The monstrous crimson sky bore witness as Wamujin stood over the fallen,